All right, the 773's got to have a new engine. I usually rebuild these engines, but this is not a good candidate for an engine rebuild. So we're going to replace it, but we're going to replace it kind of on a budget. So what I did is I found a fellow YouTuber, Decent Garage. I'm going to leave a link to his page down in the description, and check it out. He's got a really cool page, man. You know, he doesn't claim to be a diesel mechanic or anything, but he's not afraid to try anything. He's got a really cool channel, really good with the Cummins, like the first generation trucks and stuff. So check it out, Decent Garage. He was actually going to transplant an industrial V2203 Kubota engine into a Jeep, and decided to go a different route. So I picked the engine up from him, and we're going to transplant a reefer engine into the Bobcat. When I say reefer engine, it came out of a refrigerated truck unit, and they are set up differently than the Bobcat engines. They're both Kubota V2203s, just the way they accessorize them and set them up are different. Let's take a look at what we got. So this is the unit we got. You can tell right away the oil pan's different. You know, the whole bell housing is different. Flywheel, you know, the intake is different. Front cover's different. So what we got to do is we're going to start by tearing off the bell housing flywheel. We've got to tear off the exhaust manifold. We got to take off all these brackets on the front cover here. Injection lines, intake manifold's got to come off. Front pulley's different. That's got to be changed out, and the whole front cover is actually going to be changed out because the way the oil filter assembly is not going to work in the Bobcat. So really, we're tearing this thing all the way down to just a bare block and a head, and we're going to put all of our Bobcat engine parts on this engine and slide it back in. But before we start tearing down that engine, I got to get this engine out. That way, as we tear one down, we can rebuild the other and put the parts, blah, blah. So I'm going to take you along with me, and we're going to do this real quick. We're going to chop this. It's going to be edited tight. So let me show you how we get the engine out of one of these skid steers.
So the very first thing we got to do is get the battery out of the way, and just remove the battery cables and the battery hold down and slide that right out. And then we're going to remove the air filter housing. There's just 3 bolts holding this filter housing on, and disconnect the intake tube and slide the air filter housing right out of the way. Now I'm working on getting the tensioner out of the way and the drive belt. So there's the tensioner, and then we remove the fan belt and the hydraulic drive belt. Then I loosen up the flywheel, and we remove the flywheel. And now I'm starting to take out the rear engine mount bolts. I've got kind of 2 of them in the top there that are a 3/4, and then the rest of them around the outside are a 5/8. In this case, they're usually like a 7/16. I'm sorry, an 11/16. Removing the starter now. So I removed the power wires from the starter, and the starter's held on with 3 bolts. They're real easy to get to. Use a 9/16 wrench or socket and pull the starter off. And now I'm just trying to get the muffler out of the way. That's the next thing to do, and it's just held on with 2 bolts, one on either side of the muffler. And the hardest part really is just getting the muffler off the exhaust tube that goes down to the exhaust manifold. Sometimes they're rusted on and might even need to be cut off. But in this case, I was able to you know, kind of work it and get it off there. So now I'm just going to start disconnecting fuel lines and get the fuel filter housing out of the way. And then I'm going to go ahead and take out, this is an engine mount right here, and we'll go ahead and take some bolts out of it. I'm going to leave one bolt installed, you know, just while I take the rest of the mounts off so the engine doesn't fall down. I like to bag all of my bolts. No matter how many times I've done this, I still like to bag the bolts and sometimes label them so I know what goes where. Coolant overflow tank, and pulled that out of the way. And now we've got a couple brackets over here on the right side of the engine that we need to get out of the way. So I'm removing the electrical from the brackets, then we're going to slide those brackets. And now this is the fuel shutoff solenoid assembly, and the oil fill tube kind of just bolts onto the front of the engine. I just get that out of the way just to have a little more room to pull this thing out. And then disconnecting the fuel timer and relay assembly. And just set all that to the side. Now the hydraulic filter assembly up here, I loosen it up and just take the bolts out here so I have a little room for it to just move around so I can get the engine pulled out. I've never really taken one completely out. It'd be nice, I guess, to pull it out, but I don't want the extra mess of losing all that hydraulic fluid coming out of the cooler assembly. So I just loosen it up and kind of set it to the side. Now I'm just finished and taking off the rest of the wiring. We've got a oil pressure sensor here, and let's see, we got the glow plug wire, charge pressure wire, and coolant temperature wire. Get all those out of the way. So that's pretty much all there is to the back side of the engine. Now we've got to go over to, I guess, the front side or the inside of the engine, and this is the hardest part of the whole job. I mean, some of them are easier than others. This one right here this one fought me a little bit. There's just no good way to get anything in there to get those bolts off, and they're so dadgum tight. Yeah, it's a pain. So what I'm doing is I'm just removing the upper steering centering plate right here, and that just gives us a little more room to try to fit in there and get these 4 bolts out of this engine mount. This engine mount alone is the reason that some people pull the whole skid out. What I mean by that is you'll see people, they ask a lot of times, what's easier, pulling the engine out or the whole skid? And really it's just a couple more bolts and a few hoses, and we can slide out the whole hydraulic pump assembly and everything. But that just makes a big mess. If we can get to these 4 bolts, it's just the way to do it. Like I said, this is the hardest part of the job. And you can see I just dive right in here and I work on them. I don't have much. I think I get 2 of them out when I'm kind of in this position, but not a lot of luck. So I've put together a couple extensions here and some got an actual swivel and a swivel socket. Wait till you see this concoction I put together. But it worked, you know. Got it on the bolts good and square, and they eventually came out. It's like last time this engine was put in, you know, it's like they use Loctite. These bolts are always seem like they're Loctited in. It's crazy. Always fighting these things. Yeah, I believe this is the last one here. So an actual universal joint and a swivel socket. No, I guess that wasn't the last one. Okay. This is the last one. He came up at a sharp angle right around the tank there. Yeah, there's just no way to get the camera in there for you to really see exactly what I'm doing. There's barely enough room to get my hands in there, but I did finally get the last bolt. You know, you put your head in there, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, here it is. So universal joint and a swivel socket. It worked. It ain't stupid if it works, right? Now it's time to get the engine out. You know, I use an overhead crane. You can do it with a engine hoist, no problem. I had to take the exhaust pipe off the manifold right there you just saw. Usually I don't have to pull that off, but this machine, it was hanging up on the fan housing, so I had to pull that exhaust pipe off. And I don't even use chains. I use straps because the engine is kind of tucked under the frame there a little bit. But when you use an overhead crane with the strap, the strap kind of rolls under the frame there, and it just pulls it right out, as you saw. It just, once you get it out of the bell housing there, the engine just kind of falls out. So it's completely disconnected, except for the cooling hoses here. We've got the radiator hose on the left and right side there. So just got the left side off, and now I can get to the right side. I just slide the engine out just a little bit. Just gives you a little more room to get those hoses off. That's why I do those last. And now the engine's completely out. I mean, this is about an hour and a half, on a good day. I fought those bolts for probably 45 minutes just on the inside. So this one took me about 2.5 hours. I didn't finish it the night before. This is the next morning. So about 2.5 hours to get one of these engines out. And, it's really not that bad. But now we got to swap everything over to the reefer engine, but that's going to be another video. As of now, that's how you pull the engine out of a, this is a F-Series skid steer. So have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.